So kind of coming after that ending, I feel like there's a really nice kind of interplay in this book between that magical, carefree feeling of childhood and then hard reality. And I think in general in your books, like a lot of the drama is emotional tension between the characters, and that's definitely true in this book too. But Caroline and Eddie take a lot of risks and they face like a lot of real physical threats in this book in a way that felt kind of unique. There's horse theft and there's the threat of highwaymen and starvation and there's like a sketchy boat ride. So as I was reading, I felt this undercurrent of like physical danger in this book that felt really threatening. And in the end, the only danger that's realized is almost the breakdown of their relationship. But I wondered, as you were writing, if you considered having any of those physical threats kind of come to pass, and what prompted you to include that sort of background in the story and how it affected their love story.
Hmm, interesting. The physical threats, I think, come from two places. One is, unlike many romances where the story is the couple meets and then the first half is about them falling in love somehow, and then the second half is really like what's gonna prevent them from being together. This one is the entire book is what is going to prevent them from being together.
Mm.
And so it had to be a lot of external things because they were so confident in their love from the get-go. So there are some non-physical external things that keep them apart, but I think because they love each other so much, for them to really be kept apart, the stakes of those external factors has
Mm.
to keep increasing. And then also a lot of the book is about Caroline from a position of privilege,
Mhm.
learning viscerally what that privilege is. And the Regency British society was very dangerous. And if
Yeah.
you didn't have money or status, like you probably were going to have physical threats, including hunger, including robberies and stuff. As to why none of it came to fruition, I think maybe I didn't think about that. I mean, I think in general, I'm not that interested in traumatizing my characters or exploring the aftermath of trauma on the
Mhm.
page in this dance of um, escapist fiction and something that's enjoyable. That's kind of a line that I haven't been that interested
Yeah.
in crossing yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I enjoyed that it didn't cross that line, but it felt like this sort of interesting dance with danger. And I think, aside from those like physical threats, Caroline and Eddie both feel like kind of like very vulnerable characters. And maybe it's because they're both the babies of their families and they're both kind of dealing with anxiety throughout the whole book, and they're like trying to make this plan, but they're pretty bad at it. They're very inexperienced. It was kind of an interesting feeling that I
I,
had.
I was intimidated writing them because I knew they had to be young at their
Hmm.
story because they have to be young in order for the family to try to stop them from being together, which was the story I knew I wanted to tell. And I was intimidated writing a 20-year-old that was convincing and like convincing myself that 20-year-olds could actually be in love with the person that they should be together and they're not babies and it
Hmm.
wouldn't be better for them to break up. And so I think that's part of like the planning part where they're doing it really poorly, but they like are just throwing themselves into it. That was kind of like me trying to get in touch with like, okay, you think you know everything. So you're going to make this decision. And
Hmm.
then what happens?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I like that they're not always right, but this will kind of work through it. One of the big questions of the Preston series is power and who has power and self-determination and lifting others up. And you've given each of the Preston siblings their own individual struggles, but this was kind of the first time that I felt like the characters were both so disempowered. And Eddie is dealing with issues of class and race, and he's also in a profession that he didn't choose. So he's kind of like he's feel like he's totally disempowered in his whole life. And Caroline ostensibly has more power being from this wealthy family and a lot of privilege, but she also is financially dependent, and so like in a way she can't choose anything about her life. And I felt like they were both kind of at the mercy of others and circumstance. The question of power felt central to this book in a different way from some of the others. And I wonder if you could talk about like what you were thinking about power and like who has power as you were writing this one.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think of the I haven't thought about it from the lens of power. I think about it from the lens of privilege and how
Mm,
the whole Prestons I have wanted to explore what does it mean to know that you have privilege and to want to do something about that, but then also sometimes to not know that you have privilege. And so from the very beginning, when I conceptualized this series, I knew that Lord Preston, who has done so many things progressively throughout his life, such as turning Northfield Hall into the egalitarian estate that it is, this was his blind spot being confronted. He wants to protect Caroline from what he sees as an unnatural alliance. He doesn't think that she could be happy in a non privileged life, which he perceives that if she married down in class and possibly he might have some racism in there. He can't imagine that she would be happy, and so he wants to protect her from something that he doesn't think is good for her. And Caroline doesn't see it that way at all because she has been raised by him to see the world in a different way. And so when I wrote her, I thought of her as having a lot of privilege, but not having experience. And so she had to learn a lot about what it meant. Like she knew that she had privilege, but she didn't know really the consequences of that. But you're right. She also is lacking a very big privilege in the Regency world, which is being a man. So she is young. She's younger than 21, so she can't marry without her parents' permission. And she is a woman who has been trained to be, I mean, her father doesn't want her necessarily to be a wife, but he has trained her to be a member of the high society. And so she doesn't have skills that would help her survive as a woman earning money. Yeah. And then Eddie, he doesn't have a lot of privileges. And so the question with him is how much does he resent that? How much does he say that's my lot? How much does he want to change that? Does he see it as something systemic or something that's just individual to him? Those were the kinds of questions that I was asking.